Isn't the only startup in trouble. Edtech firm Byju's is battling massive financial woes. In the midst of a cash crunch, Byju's founder and CEO Byju Raveendran has sent an email to employees announcing that January's salaries have been paid earlier than promised. But Byju's is facing a lawsuit from its overseas lenders after it failed to meet payment deadlines. Gentlemen, stay with us, Nikhil, Sandeep. But before that, Aishwarya Anand is standing by with more on what's happened at Byju's. Aishwarya?
It's been a hectic and a highly emotional week at Byju's, and the challenges facing the company have indeed left founder and group CEO Byju Raveendran shaken. After clearing delayed salaries for the month of January, Raveendran, in a letter to employees last evening, confessed he has had to move mountains for months to make this payroll. For Byju's, salaries add up to 70 crore rupees a month, and the delay, albeit a short one, has underlined the severity of liquidity crunch at the company. In fact, Byju's US unit even filed for bankruptcy after defaulting on the $1.2 billion loan. Now, it is to be noted that some of the lenders have also initiated bankruptcy proceedings against Byju's in India. The weight of these liabilities seems heavier given the billion-dollar loss posted by the company for FY22. And even as we await the audited FY23 financials, Byju says it is seeking to script a turnaround, cut monthly burn and achieve profitability. To make it happen, Byju's launched a rights issue on the 29th of January to raise $200 million in emergency cash. That too by slashing its valuation by 99% from $22 billion to just about $225 million. Calling the rights issue a fight, Raveendran in his letter last evening also slammed select investors, saying a few vested interests are trying to sabotage the company by impeding the rights issue. The comment is now latest in a series of bitter exchanges between Byju's management and some key investors who have demanded an extraordinary general meeting calling for the ouster of Raveendran and a change in leadership. Investors have also called for a reconstitution of the company's board, saying that Byju's founders have been controlling it since 3 of them walked out in June 2023. Raveendran, who doesn't want to give up his corner office, told investors, "You have no right to vote on CEO or management change." The standoff has surely raised question marks over the potential success of the rights issue, but the company claims that most investors, barring a few worrying ones, are standing in support. We'll have to wait to see if Byju Raveendran can move this mountain.
All right, Aishwarya, thank you so much for those details. Sandeep, Nikhil, thank you for being here. But Sandeep, I'm going to quickly come to you first. I know you're on a bit of a time crunch. So a group of investors of Byju's who hold about 30% sought to oust the top brass of the company led by Byju Raveendran, saying they were deeply concerned about the future stability of the company under its current leadership. However, Byju Raveendran was quick to let them know that they did not have the right to do this. So what can the investors do? What sort of legal recourse can investors take, if there are any, at this point?
No, so investors, shareholders are the kings, right? Except they exercise their powers only through shareholder meetings and not directly through. So I think what Byju is saying is technically correct, that the shareholders cannot remove the CEO, but they can remove the entire board and get new people in, and the new board can then of course elect a different CEO. So I think it's important to know that if somebody has 30% shares, would typically have quite a presence in deciding who the CEO is going to be. So it's probably just a matter of time before they get to get their own person. And just a correction to your colleague, is $225 million valuation after a $200 million injection. So that's pretty much zero valuation that's being talked of even by the existing promoter. So I think it has indeed collapsed, and I don't know what they're going to fight about if the company doesn't remain. But like I said, yes, a 30% shareholder group would have a very substantial say in deciding who the CEO is going to be. But it won't be direct; it'll be indirect.
Right, it won't be as direct, it will be indirect. And we also saw Byju struggle to pay their payrolls for January. So the founder wrote to the employees saying that he had to move mountains to make payroll. So what does this mean for Byju's? Where does it leave the company? There's only so much you can do to make payroll every month if you don't have the funds for it.
No, especially, so I'll end because I need to leave, so just kind of quick 30-second comment. Yeah. So I mean, when a company like Byju's is run on investor money, I think they're completely beholden to them. When your losses are greater than your revenue, I think it's a very different business model, because then it's kind of punting on the future. And with a model like that, you can't really make enemies of your investors. So I think I don't see a future at all for the company to survive in any form at all. It'll just be a messy dispute, which is of course going to be good for us lawyers, but it will end up in just intermittent disputes.
All right.
Thank you.
Right, so you don't see any future for the company. All right, Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us. Nikhil, it is time for us to take a short break, but we will come to you on the other side to discuss what happens to Byju's going forward. Welcome back. You're still with us on Startup Street. Edtech firm Byju's is battling massive financial woes. So what's the way ahead for the company? We still have with us Nikhil Pawar, the founder of Medianama. Nikhil, now Byju's has proposed a rights issue at a steep 99% cut to its peak valuation of $22 billion. Now, this will obviously reset the cap table at the Edtech company, and any existing investor in Byju's who doesn't participate in the rights issue may practically see its stake fully erode. For example, Prosus will have to pay $18 million to retain its 9% stake, while Peak 15 will have to pump in $14 million. Do you think at this point that this will go through without any hiccups?
I'm just surprised that investors don't try and change the management. I know there's a 30% group of investors that are trying to do that. This is a deeply problematic company in the way that, in its history, they have been essentially almost running like a lending company. They provide loans to parents and then take high fees on the basis of those loans. The model was never sustainable, but investors let this happen. We're in a situation right now where the valuation has completely been, the value in the company is almost completely wiped out. There's very little left. And, even if it's at a 99% cut to its previous valuation, I think it's just Byju's trying to get some money in the company to start over with it. Because, I think we will see a situation where there's going to be more of a battle between the investors. And I'm just wondering what the board was doing all along. Byju's has had change of accountants of accountancy firms repeatedly. It's had its accounting practices has been questioned. Issues have also been raised in Parliament by Karti Chidambaram about the functioning of some of these edtech firms and the extractive nature, almost like the preying nature of their business. I'm just surprised this company is still around, to be honest.
Absolutely. So you're saying that you are surprised that the company is still around. You've mentioned all of these things. So let's take a step back. There've been so many layoffs, governance issues, funding troubles, all of that you've pointed out. So there's always been issues over the last few years. So where do you think that Byju's went wrong? And what are the options in front of it? Where does this leave the startup?
I think the investors are also to blame to some extent, right? They were trying to scale rapidly a business and grow it in terms of revenue on its way to probably an IPO at some point in time, without looking at the fundamentals of how the business was actually operating in terms of the alleged mis-selling that was going on. There's a book that's recently come out that indicates how the poor who didn't really understand the quality of the content and how they were preyed upon. And then there's enough disclosures about how people were, it seems, and I don't have evidence of this, but people signed on to Byju's, assuming that they're signing for a few months as a trial, but actually they were signing a lending document. These are allegations that have been made in the past. I can't, at some level, I would say that the board was asleep at the wheel, and as long as the valuation kept growing, nobody cared. That's what happens when you're riding a tiger, right? As long as you're on the tiger, it's fine. Now the tide's going out, so I honestly don't see a way back for them, and I don't know what the board in particular was doing over here in terms of did an increase in valuation justify everything that was going on? Also, it's easier to ask questions of these companies once they're in trouble. I think the role of the board is to ask these questions before trouble hits them. And I would say the investors are as much to blame for this as the promoters are.
Absolutely, Nikhil. Thank you so much for joining us. So Nikhil and Sandeep both saying that the investors are also to blame and they don't see a way back for the company. Nikhil, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And with that, Ritu, it's back to you.